All right, today we have Mark Logan in the Growth and Code studio today. And first of all, Mark, I want to really thank you for coming out and sitting with us today and talking about everything you have going on at Moonshot in Berkeley. I want to give our audience just a quick, give you an opportunity to introduce yourself, who you are, and kind of how you landed where you're at.
Great. Well, I lead Moonshot, which is the innovation lab at Berkeley. And our job is to help make emerging technologies accessible to our agency partners at Berkeley and also to our clients. So my team looks at new technologies that might be relevant to our clients in the sort of near future, in the next 2 to 5 years, and to go out and explore and experiment with those technologies and to turn those experiments into tangible experiences. So we create exhibits and experiments that people can play with and walk through, and hopefully then take those personal experiences and turn them into creative work and output for the agency and for our clients.
I love it. So every time I see, an agency or a quote-unquote big company, doing this sort of innovation, skunkworks lab type thing, I get really excited because I think it takes a lot of vision from an executive team to allow that to happen. And I'm curious. You've been at Berkeley, I think, what do you say, 12 years?
12 years.
Okay, and you started Look and Feel, and one thing I've found kind of fascinating about your background is when did you start Look and Feel?
We started Look and Feel in 1996.
So in '96, when people were still talking about, interactive, like it was like this whole otherworldly thing.
New media.
Right, new media, right? You guys were way out ahead of building, websites and Flash interfaces and all the things that at the time were completely off the radar for traditional agencies. How did that happen?
Well, actually, my experience with interactive media started a long time before that. In the late '80s, I got my first taste of digital media in Sydney, Australia. I began to create PC-based graphics for film and video. And then when I moved to Kansas City, I began to do digital nonlinear video editing. And that led me to a job in 1992 with Spinnaker Communications, heading up one of the first interactive studios in Kansas City. Huh. And we were doing diskette-based multimedia interactive pieces. One of my very first things that I ever did was a training piece for FEMA on radioactive disaster response.
Really?
Yeah, we had Geiger counters, and it was kind of amazing. I did an in-store fit finder kiosk for Lee Jeans. I think we won Glamour Magazine's Best Technical Achievement in Denim Award in 1994. Nice. So that was kind of cool. Probably the only award I'll ever win from Glamour Magazine. So that was how I got my start in interactive. But
is that business still around, Spinnaker?
It's not.
Okay, all right.
And actually it folded in 1996, and a bunch of us from that business then banded together to start Look and Feel.
Okay, got it. And you still Look and Feel in 05-ish?
2005,
okay.
Yep.
And you've been at Berkeley ever since. So at what point did Moonshot become a thing?
Well, really around 2011, I was looking at sort of a new. It was a confluence of things. There was the maker movement that had sort of started to take hold. At the same time, we were starting to see the very first wave of agencies starting up innovation labs. These sort of skunk work teams doing interesting work with IoT technologies and little bit of VR and some of the technologies that weren't I would say in widespread adoption. I went to our agency management and said, there's something happening here that I think we ought to be part of, and I'd like to devote some resources to pursuing these types of activities. At the same time, we were beginning to see agencies pay attention to schools of thought like design thinking and agile, and look at them not merely as ways of pursuing specific types of projects or ways of pursuing projects within those disciplines, but actually ways of doing business and using Agile as a way of, for example, of managing projects outside just the technical discipline, or applying design thinking as a way of doing innovation beyond design. And so, to my surprise, our agency management said, sure, go build this thing, whatever it might be. And I was given a pretty broad mandate to go create Moonshot.
Interesting.
And I think that stems from Barclay's independence, where we are not a holding company owned agency, where we are pretty fiercely independent, and we're one of the few large independent agencies in the country. And our independence, our employee ownership, gives us the ability to go out and make those kind of investments.
Interesting. So there was like board level decisions that you said, okay, we're going to invest X in building out this thing called Moonshot, because there's other initiatives other than Moonshot, right?
Absolutely.
You have a couple of other ones.
Yeah, so there's a board that governs. There's also Barclay is employee owned, so there's an ESOP.
Okay.
There's a trustee that looks after the all of the ESOP participants, the vested interests. So there is governorship, but the executive team has pretty broad mandate and latitude to make those kinds of decisions and investments. And Barclay has been pretty good about saying, we think there's an opportunity here. Let's go pursue it.
Cool. Well, so we just got done touring your exhibit called Marco Polo, right? If you're in the Kansas City area, I highly recommend swinging by Barclay and checking it out, because I was blown away. There's 3 different interfaces there. I want to focus most of this discussion on conversational commerce. This buzzword, if you will, comes up a lot in conversations that we have with our clients and just people in and around the space. I thought it was super encouraging to see what you guys were doing and actually putting it to work, right? So talk a little bit about how Marco Polo became a thing, what it is, and maybe a little bit about the technology behind it.
Yeah, you bet. Well, one of the things that my group does is tries to make these emerging technologies accessible and tangible. We talk a lot about creating tangible forms of thought leadership. It's pretty common in the agency world for emerging technology groups and innovation labs to put out blog posts and white papers and PowerPoint decks, and that's fine, that's good, and we do that too. But we want to go a little beyond that. We want to make the things that we do tangible and experienceable. So for the last year and a half, we've created exhibits of the technologies that we're exploring. And this one, Marco Polo, is around conversational technologies. So we've been looking at the rise of chatbots, intelligent agents, smart speakers, and other conversational technologies. We think this is one of the most important technological trends that's happening right now. Yeah. We see voice technologies and conversational interfaces in general happening not only in the obvious channels like messaging and smart speakers, but really becoming a pervasive interface throughout all of our lives and across various different touch points over the next 5 years. So we are going to be talking to not only our phones and our smart speakers, but our watches, our fridges, our televisions, our washing machines, our earbuds. We're going to be having these intelligent agents and assistants with us wherever and whenever we want them to be, and maybe some places where we don't necessarily want them to be. And that's going to change a lot of our behaviors.
Yeah, for sure. Have you guys, we touched a little bit on this when we were over at your office, but how do you guys approach the conversational commerce, or conversational interface process? Is that a separate team at Barclay, or do you have a user experience group that works with clients to dissect those challenges and what an experience needs to look like?
Yeah, we're really still in the early stages of trying to figure that out. Okay. Right now, conversational experience design is involves the user experience design group. It involves our experience design team. It involves our creative team. It involves our emerging tech team. All of those people sort of coming together right now to figure out what the framework is and what the steps are. We've developed several chatbots at this point, some for internal use and some for clients. So, we've got several models and we've had some lessons learned about what works well, what doesn't work so well. Some things have worked in certain situations and some things haven't worked. And so I don't know that there's any one particular framework that's going to work across all scenarios. But we're beginning to figure out what the...
I'd imagine that you probably have to have a pretty forward-thinking client list to get into this kind of stuff, right? Like to have a client allow, I guess experimentation, for lack of a better term, right? Because this stuff, anybody that says that they have this stuff figured out is probably crazy, right? This stuff is very new, right?
Yeah, it's new. Although, in some categories, the industry leaders have already been doing it for 2 years.
Yeah.
So, in some categories, if you're just getting into it, you are a, follower.
Yeah.
And maybe not even a fast follower.
Yeah.
You look at QSR, for example. All of the QSR players have chatbots on Facebook Messenger that you can order from.
Yeah.
They're all doing conversational commerce, and most of them have smart speaker skills that you can order from via voice as well. Yeah. Other categories like finance, all of them have messenger chatbots. Travel, most of the airlines have chatbots. So there's some categories where, this technology, maybe not completely well established, but, if you're not already doing it, you're late to the party.
Yeah, for sure. How much has your media team dug into this? I'm curious, obviously the implications on search here are huge.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And Google did
monumental.
$60 billion in revenue last year, and the lion's share of it was, pay-per-click advertising, search queries. So we were just talking here in the office about the implications of that. Talk about that a little bit and how your media team feels about this world.
Well, I think you're right. The implications for search are huge. I don't think anyone really knows what it's going to mean yet, right? We hear some pretty dramatic statistics already. I think from Forrester, we heard that 20% of search is already voice.
Wow.
That seems astronomical to me.
I'd buy that on mobile. Man, that's an interesting stat.
I think that includes, use of voice through a mobile device.
Yeah.
And then I think Gartner predicts that by 2020, 50% of search will be voice.
Wow. I wonder if that includes like Alexa and HomePod.
It does.
That sort of thing.
And Alexa has a lion's share of the smart speaker market. So if you think about the shift from Google to Alexa, right? And what that means in terms of revenue from Google to Amazon.
Yeah, for sure.
That's and I think Alexa's search is powered by Bing.
Yeah,
right.
I think so.
So that's a shift from from Google to Microsoft.
Yep. And I think a lot of I know not maybe a lot, but I think there's a slow migration of well, maybe not even slow, but the migration of PPC dollars from Google Shopping. Google, Amazon's PPC marketplace is continuing to grow.
Yeah.
Stealing, shopping Google PLA dollars.
But there are even more sort of nuanced implications because mobile search is contextually different than typed search, right?
Yeah.
So you're more likely to use longer, more descriptive phrases when you're talking.
Yeah.
More likely to include location.
Yeah.
So it's not just a one-to-one shift. It's a difference in type of searching as well.
Yeah. What about talk a little bit about the tech behind this, right? I mean, is there an active, I would imagine if you went out to like GitHub or any of the other open source technology platforms, you'd find tons of libraries of different things. I'm assuming there's a massive developer influx around this tech. Is that accurate?
Beyond that, there are, I don't know, there are probably 50 billion different chatbot platforms.
Yeah.
You can hardly, swing a dead cat on the internet without hitting a chatbot platform. There are so many different ways to build a chatbot out there. I would say that chatbots are deceptively easy to create, right? It's super, super easy to make a chatbot. I could make a chatbot for you in an hour, and it would, say nice things and do small talk.
Yeah.
It's also really, really hard to build a good chatbot.
Yeah, sure.
And to make one that anyone would care about.
Yeah, websites are that way too, right?
Yeah, right.
You could slap together a website in 5 minutes on, Wix or whatever.
Absolutely.
To build a site that converts traffic and does what you want. I mean, the whole that parallels that it exists with chatbots for sure. We see a lot of it in marketing automation too, like we were saying earlier. Marketing automation and designing email sequences and flows that make sense within your customer process is not automatic. Right? It's a ton of work. So how does are you guys investing in your own proprietary technology platforms yet?
No, I don't think that really makes sense for us.
Okay.
So, we play multiple roles in the creation of a conversational experience.
Okay.
The first role we play is on the strategic side. Figuring out whether a conversational experience makes sense, and if so, what's the nature of that, and who's it aimed at, what's the outcome, what's the structure of that. We play a role on the creative side of that. What's the brand voice?
Yep.
What's the creative content? What's the script? And then when it comes to the implementation, we may pick a platform. Our clients may already have a platform preference. They may already be invested in a platform. Or we may develop something from scratch.
Yeah.
But to be honest, these days there are so many good platforms out there already.
Yeah.
It really doesn't make sense for us to create our own in all likelihood, particularly because one of the key elements of a good chatbot platform is the AI piece around natural language recognition.
Yeah.
Because you really want your bot to be able to understand the human language input.
Yep.
And to be able to recognize a dozen different ways of asking the same question and to be able to respond to that question easily.
Yeah.
And those things exist, right? The engines to understand that exist, and there's no sense in recreating that wheel because that takes a massive investment.
Yeah. We work with a lot of clients that I think this chatbots are kind of like the new thing, right? And we see a lot of clients with all the new social media platforms and every new thing on the internet. I feel like what happens a lot of times is brands will immediately jump to, we need to do that, right? We need to have a Snapchat account, or we need to have a chat bot, or we need to start writing on Medium, or whatever the new thing is. And something you just said really kind of struck me, and we have these conversations with our clients a lot, is that yes, a chatbot may make sense for you, but let's back up a little bit. Let's figure out what the goal is, right? Are we trying to improve the customer service process? Are we trying to acquire customers? Are we trying to build a physical experience that enhances a stadium or something like that? I think it's super important for anyone listening that's tinkering with the idea of chatbots or any new tech, really, is to kind of back up a little bit and figure out what you're trying to accomplish, and then focus on the creative process and the implementation. So do you have, I'm guessing the answer is no, but I'm curious, what sort of measurement gets put in place for this stuff? Like, is it possible to, like, what are the, this is a buzzword, but KPIs, like what do you look at when you deploy a sentiment analysis chatbot? What's the measure of did this work or not?
Yep. Well, very much depends on the strategic intent and what the objective is.
Yeah.
So if it's a conversational commerce bot, right, you're looking at pretty standard sales and conversion metrics, right? You know, how much revenue are you generating? You know, what's the conversion rate? All of that stuff. You know, if it's a lead gen bot, then you're looking at those kind of metrics. If it's a customer service bot, then you're looking at things like how many inquiries are we satisfactorily closing, and you may be looking at how many inquiries are we handling as opposed to having to transfer over to a human agent. Because we know that there's a pretty significant percentage of the population, and that's growing year over year, who would rather deal with a bot than with a human. And if we can easily and satisfactorily handle those inquiries through a chatbot, then that's a win-win, right? Because there's a cost savings for the client, and the human being on the other end of that interaction is happier and more quickly satisfied. So, you know, those are some of the KPIs that are out there. For some of the more brand or experiential chatbots, it gets a little harder to nail down those KPIs.
Yeah, I can imagine. So talk about, you know, the chatbot that I guess I don't even know if you would categorize it as a chatbot. I think I would, but Facebook Messenger, you know, we have tinkered with Messenger a bit with a handful of clients in the conversion funnel process. Talk about, you know, the difference between building your own chatbot versus building on top of a chatbot infrastructure that customers are already using.
Mm-hmm. Do you mean in terms of like building a chatbot, say, on your website versus building a chatbot in Messenger?
Yeah, that and just, you know, at what point does it make sense to integrate an existing infrastructure into your chatbot strategy versus trying to create that from the ground up?
Well, I think the good news is you really don't have to choose anymore. I mean, most of these chatbot platforms allow you to create the logic and the interactions and then publish across multiple platforms.
Okay, good.
So that's generally the approach. You really figure out during the strategic process where it is that you want this to live, and what are the platforms that make sense for your target audience. You know, be it Kik, Messenger, or SMS. You know, your website and whatever, and then have it live there.
So we were over at your office earlier, and there was like 10 flat panels on the wall, and that's your social media team, So is that team fully integrated yet with this process, or integrated at all with the process? Like, if you have a client that you're working with and doing conversational commerce or planning for, does that team work alongside them?
Yeah, they're very much aware of the technology and very much invested in it. If a chatbot is part of our social strategy and makes sense, then obviously they're plugged into that. Yeah. That team includes community managers who are responsible for responding to live inquiries. So if they have to do that alongside an automated response, a chatbot, then they need to be plugged into that loop.
So if there's an automated sequence of 3 responses for some default questions, and then on the side of that, a community manager is having a separate conversation, like that person needs to be aware of what's happening in the bot flow.
Yeah, so, you know, bot flows can be a lot more sophisticated than that, right? Yeah. So, I mean, you may have a bot that's capable of handling hundreds of different inquiries, but at any point in time, the human on the other end can say, you know, you're not really doing it for me. Let me talk to a human. Yeah. And then, boom, that instantly kicks them over to this person needs help. Yeah. Right? So it's not so much that there is a particular flow. It's like at any point in time that human being wants to talk to another human, they get to talk to another human.
Yeah. Interesting. All right. So I want to shift gears towards the home, right? Yeah. You've got Alexa, Google Home, HomePod, and Cortana, right? You know, for all the sort of people that are thinking about, you know, cable cutters and all that whole world, like at what point does this, and maybe it's already happening, at what point does this technology invade the house and become real, right? Like I can get a Google, I mean, we have an Alexa at our house, but we rarely use it. You know, I'm curious, like what's that next step to making it the way that the internet is now, right?
So I think we're really close. I would say certainly within the next 5 years. What you saw at CES 2018 was all of the, well, particularly Amazon Echo and Google Home announcing integrations into devices and into places like cars, right? So it's not so much that these devices are, going to go places. It's that these entities, these assistants, are going to be embedded in other things. Yeah. So, imagine just being able to walk around anywhere and say, "Oh, hey Alexa, do this thing for me," right? Because Alexa's kind of everywhere, right? And so you don't have to think about talking to that speaker that's over in the corner of the room, or talking to Alexa because you sit in the kitchen and you're in the bathroom. Yeah. Alexa's in the light switch, and Alexa's in the lamp, and Alexa's just everywhere. She's just conveniently, anywhere you go, you can just talk to her, right? She's in your car, so while you're driving, you can just say, "Hey Alexa, play me that thing," or "Hey Alexa, set me a reminder." Yeah. So I think there are really two keys to making it work, and making it. One is ubiquity, having it be available everywhere, and the other is utility, making it really useful. So once I can access it wherever I want, and once it's really super useful, then it becomes part of my life all the time. Yeah,
man. What I find so interesting, one of the things we deal with a lot is attribution, right? So we have conversations with clients a lot about their conversion rates and how to attribute one media channel versus another, omni-channel e-commerce strategies, and how to place an ROI on one medium to the next. It kind of blows my mind thinking about that in the context of conversational commerce, right? It's hard enough now to say, all right, I've got an ad spend that generated a click on Facebook, and then a click from an email sequence, and then they finally convert from a Google Shopping ad. How do I attribute ad dollars across those three channels? Yeah. Throw chatbots into the mix, and my mind kind of goes crazy. Like, is that even on the radar now?
I'm sure it's on the radar. Yeah. I mean, the nice thing is that, I don't think it's all that different from... in some channels, like if you're talking about attribution in Facebook Messenger, that's highly trackable. True. Right? Yeah. And you got a rich data set there. Yep. Yeah. Because you got a lot of you can do semantic analysis on that day and night, right? Yeah. And there's probably click-through data too, right? Yeah. And in fact, I know for sure clients are doing click-through analysis on those Messenger bots. Yep. In fact, our clients who are doing commerce on Messenger, that's the KPI, right? Yeah. Did they click through? Did they convert? Yep.
Facebook now has a Messenger ad unit, right? So as long as you have your Facebook pixel infrastructure set up right, then you can see all that. But
right. And then when you're talking about something like the Amazon Echo and converting through that, I think personally, and this is just opinion, I think Alexa is not a very good commerce device. I don't think we're at a point yet where a whole bunch of people like to order through these devices yet. Yeah. I think they're information and entertainment devices primarily. Yeah. I'd be surprised if Amazon's making a whole lot of money through them.
Yeah, I would too. I mean, we have one in our house, and I've seen it used a handful of times. And it's
have you ever ordered anything from it?
No, it's. I mean, 99% of the queries to our Alexa in our house are my kids saying, "Amazon, play, Starboy," or whatever song they want to hear at the time, right? Yeah. But who knows? I mean, maybe that's where it'll wind up.
I did hook my Christmas tree up to her.
You did?
I did.
Sorry, I talked about
Amazon or Alexa, turn the Christmas tree on.
Really?
Yeah. I bought a Wemo light power adapter, plugged it into the outlet, and it connected to Wi-Fi and connected it to the Echo. Okay. Took less than 5 minutes to get them to talk to each other. Nice. And then I could just turn it on and off, and it was super easy to do.
You're a hacker.
No, at a very primitive level.
I love it. Cool. Well, you mentioned something early on in our discussion about the maker movement, and I'm curious. Just if I know, I forget what it's called. I know there's a something here in town. There's a facility not too far from here called
Hammerspace.
Yes, yeah. So, those guys have a place where you can go and just make stuff, right? Do you guys? Are you involved with that at all, or?
Well, it's funny that you ask. I was just yesterday. I was at a round table of all of the maker spaces in Kansas City.
Really?
Yeah, and there were I don't know, maybe 30 or 40 people there.
Really?
There's a massive collection of people who have various kinds of maker spaces in Kansas City.
Yeah.
And it ranges from folks like Hammerspace to folks who have set up sewing maker spaces and fashion maker spaces, craft-oriented maker spaces. There are some corporate-owned maker spaces. Okay. I know Hallmark has a maker space, a Fab Lab. We were meeting at Operation Breakthrough because they have a maker space for preschoolers.
Really?
And they have a smart lab for older kids where they teach coding skills and things like that. And they're in the process of expanding those spaces. So, the makerspace movement is quite alive and well and flourishing in Kansas City.
Yeah, I think it's super cool. A few years ago, I was working on a little T-shirt company as a sort of a side hustle. And I met some guys that ran one called the Jarbo Initiative. I don't know if it's still around or not, but they were really involved with Casey Maker Fair and that kind of thing. All right, so... Other than chatbots, what else is going on at Moonshot? Like, what's the other? We talked a little bit about VR. Tell me about that world and what other interesting projects would our audience need to go check out that you guys are working on?
Well, we're currently looking at AI in the creative space. So, looking at creative applications of AI, looking at AI in the creative process. And that dovetails with sort of an overarching interest of mine, which is creative technology. I'm involved in a movement in Kansas City to bring creative technologists together.
That's right. You spoke about this not too long ago, right?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We held a creative technology happy hour back in October over at Barclay, and that was sponsored by the Kansas City Ad Club, AAFKC, and we have another one coming up in I think it's April. I'll have to look up the date here.
Cool. So where can someone go to find information about that?
I will look it up in my email.
All right, cool. I think as we were walking over here, we started to talk about the implications or applications, I guess, of some of this technology that you guys are working on, and how embedding the creative process into the use of these technologies is super, super important. The idea of creative teams and new experienced teams, if you will, working together to create these kinds of customer experiences, I think is super fascinating. The best creative teams are the ones that use technology as an asset, and so I think that's great that you guys are doing that.
Yep. So the Creative Tech event is April 26th at 5 o'clock. At Dimensional Innovations.
Oh man, talk about a cool company.
Yeah, for sure.
My goodness.
And if people can go to aafkc.com to sign up.
All right, cool. So if you're listening or watching, April 26th, 5 p.m., check it out at Dimensional Innovations. Their CEO is a good friend of mine. He's on a cycling team that I ride on.
Okay.
So Tucker, what they're doing over there is freaking cool.
Yeah, and they are really at the center of that creative tech movement.
I love it. So cool what they're doing over there. So check it out, Creative Technology Group. We'll put a link in the show notes.
Great.
To that event, and see if we can help promote that. All right, cool. Well, listen, Mark, I really enjoyed the conversation, going over and seeing the office at Barclay. I hadn't been in there in a while. The exhibit that you guys have, it was really, really cool to see that happening, a block from where we're at in Kansas City. I mean, everyone, there's a lot of talk about the coasts and what's happening on the East Coast and West Coast, even Chicago, and to see some of the stuff that's going on right here is super cool. We love it. So where can someone go to find out more information about Barkley, about Moonshot, and everything you guys are up to?
A good place to start is moonshot.barkleys.com.
Okay, good deal. Well, listen, thank you very much for taking the time. I know you're a busy guy. But,
It's a pleasure.
But we really appreciate you taking the time to come on.
All right, thanks, man.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it. That was fun.